I'd like to do is give a long introduction, maybe about 15 minutes, about AI, some of the existential risks, some of the new things that are happening. We're going to skip over what happened last week, which is just amazing. These AIs are going rogue. I don't know if you followed, the New York Times did an article about OpenAI, and then the Wall Street Journal followed up with an article about the Chinese that hacked Anthropic. So, and that just happened last week, and I was going to have a slide on that, but I got sick. So a long introduction, and then talk about the three philosophical issues which are close to my heart: reasoning or thinking, consciousness, and immortality. And then leave time for question and answer. And I told John, usually when I start going through the slides, I get a second wind and everything is fine. So let's start with a small introduction about Pope Leo and the Catholic Church's view on AI. And of course, we have this paragraph which Pope Leo expressed the day after he was elected Pope. And let's read it together. Sensing myself called to continue in the same path, I chose to take the name Leo XIV. There are different reasons for this, but mainly because Pope Leo XIII, in his historic encyclical Rerum Novarum, addressed the social question in the context of the first great industrial revolution. In our own day, the Church offers to everyone the treasury of her social teaching in response to another industrial revolution and to the developments in the field of artificial intelligence that pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. When those of us involved with AI heard about, I give a course every year on AI at Boston College, and I give a lot of conferences. We heard this quote. We were ecstatic. We were like, all right, first of all, he's an American Pope, even though the Peruvians think he's from Peru. Well, I mean, he is a Peruvian citizen, and he was Bishop of Chiclayo. But anyway, and I think Spanish is his first language. If you want, I have some funny stories about that. He gave this talk. So we said, here we have an American Pope, and he's talking about AI. This is just incredible, and he's making it a priority of his pontificate. Here he is in the Synod, the new Synod Hall. Inside the Vatican, where he gave that talk to the cardinals. And I think that's when he started working on his encyclical, which came out on May 25th. And he published his first encyclical, commonly understood as dealing with artificial intelligence. I'm sorry. Hopefully we'll get through this. Now, I think that yesterday there was an introduction to the encyclical, so we'll just go through very briefly the 5 chapters. And I chose this photo of Pope Leo because it includes Pope Leo XIII. And he wants to tie his encyclical to what Pope Leo XIII did at his time. Chapter 1 is a dynamic approach faithful to the gospel. So here we have basically the biblical foundation to Catholic social teaching. Now, I know we don't have much time, but I did about 15 interviews, and Ben is here. He works for a good friend of mine. And right after the encyclical was released, and the Vatican sent me a copy beforehand, and I was shocked by the number of people who had not read the encyclical. And finally, one of the reporters, this is being videotaped, so I can't say who, out of respect, he said to me, Father, I asked an AI for a 10-page summary of the encyclical. And I said, no, you got to read the encyclical to really understand it's not about AI. It's about the social doctrine of the church. This is Pope Leo's social encyclical. And if you look at the different chapters, okay, chapter 1 doesn't talk about AI hardly at all. Well, he does mention 2 issues very quickly, but in passing, all right? Then we go to chapter 2, which is the foundations and principles of the social doctrine of the church, which says almost nothing about AI. talks about the social doctrine of the church. And it goes through each pope since Pope Leo up until Pope Francis, and it gives a summary of what they say in their social encyclical. So far, everybody is thinking, where's the AI? Where's the AI? Now, again, I will grant you there's a couple of footnotes and there's a couple of mentions as we go through the first two chapters. Finally, we get to chapter 3, the grandeur of humanity in light of the promises of AI. But he doesn't really talk about AI that much. He talks about the framework of the Catholic Church to understand the relationship between the human being and artificial intelligence. If you like, that would be the summary of the chapter. And remember, Pope Francis is not a technician. He's not concerned so much about the technology, although he does understand it. He's a pope. And so he's going to address these issues in that light. And then finally, chapter 4, if you'd like, it's the most AI in the whole encyclical, safeguarding humanity at a time of transformation, truth, work, and freedom. And so a lot of people interviewed me on those three issues, which are very important. Truth, work, and freedom. And this is really what Pope Leo wants to talk about. Well, we don't have time. But if you want in the Q&A, we can come back to this. It's just it gets a little bit complicated. And then chapter 5 is about war. I was on a panel where we spoke about war. And I'm like, he talks about AI at two occasions in this chapter. One is lethal automatic weapons. Okay? And the other is massive surveillance of American citizens. Other than that, he talks about armed conflict. He doesn't talk about AI. So if you look at the 5 chapters, there's really not much on AI. It's basically the social doctrine of the church, and then chapter 5 where he talks about war. By the way, can we turn the video off, or does it? Not really. All right, this is public knowledge, so I'll go ahead and say, I was invited to the U.S. Ambassadors Conference on AI when Pope Leo and the President of the United States were arguing about this chapter, right? And I think it was a big misunderstanding. The journalists were just going nuts, and I avoided that altogether, and I said, I'm a Catholic priest. I don't want to get involved with the politics. Well, the day after the conference ended, Marco Rubio showed up to Rome and had a 2.5-hour conversation with Pope Leo. And I think they understood each other. And they how can you say, Marco Rubio is a very intelligent man, and he's also Catholic. And no one gets 2.5 hours with a pope. I mean, that's very, very special. And if you look at the news items after their discussion, you'll see that the Pope did not return to the conversation. So anyway, by the way, Pope Leo did visit the U.S. ambassador in his residence on July 4th. You may have seen that in the news. All right. Message for full day of social communication. Now, John did tell me that if my body holds out, we have a little extra time. So that's why I'm going a little bit slow, but we'll speed this up. If you really want to know Pope Leo's theory about AI, read this document. It's only 6 pages long, and it's all about AI. All right, it's not about social doctrine of the church. It's not about Jesus Christ. Excuse me. I mean, that's a great theme, but this is, and he's written about that in other places. This is about AI. And he issued this on January 24th, 2026, speaking on the issue of AI. And he has his famous metaphors, the human face and the human voice. And I love that because he's talking about deep fakes. Deep fakes are completely artificial audio or videos that are generated by AIs. And I tell my students, it's just a question of time before someone does one on me. And I get a call from the Secretary of State. What did you say? Yeah, I have a slide on Marco Rubio on that as well. So he used these two analogies, the human face, and that comes from the ancient Greek prosopon, which is translated into Latin personare and into English person. Right? This is the doctrine of the person according to the Catholic Church. And so this is a special thing, and it's unique to every human being, their face. And the second one is their voice. The human voice is unmistakable. And even Christ talks about that in the metaphor of the Good Shepherd. Then he develops that, he develops those analogies and talks about AI, and he does a wonderful job. Then you have the Vatican document on AI, which is much more extensive. It's very technical. It's called Antigua et Nova, and it was published in 2025. And we don't have time here, but these are the themes. If you want, we can come back to that. But that is a very good document to know about AI as well. Now, what is AI? And this continues my introduction. Artificial intelligence was coined by John McCarthy at the Dartmouth Conference in New Hampshire in 1956. And today I got an email from the people in New Hampshire inviting me to come on October 1st. So John, not all has been lost. I'm going to New Hampshire to celebrate this anniversary. And here's John McCarthy with his avant-garde computer at the time, by the way. This was a small group of mathematicians, philosophers, and other intellectuals in order to examine the notion of a Turing machine. And here is our famous hero, Alan Turing, probably one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century. And by the way, this is why I chose this photo. Behind him is a prototype of IBM's computer that was unfortunately used in the Manhattan Project to construct the atomic bomb. And Turing was a member of that group, as were the greatest physicists of the 20th century. Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, Oppenheimer. By the way, if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, it's very close to the history itself. I have a chapter in my book on the atomic weapon because I think it was something that we should never have invented. Okay, that which a digital computer does is not the same as that which a human intellect does, but the name stuck. And even people like Marvin Minsky that were at the conference said, this is not a good term. This is not a good term. What a Turing machine is a digital machine based on ones and zeros, okay? And Alan Turing invented that. What it's doing is not intelligence. It's just calculating logical symbols, which is correct. That's exactly what it's doing. And yet, he said, well, I don't have a better term. And many people in the industry today are beginning to question the term itself. I personally don't like it. I don't think what a machine is doing is intelligence. And I'll mention that, and I say that to my students all the time. But this is the term we have. And this is what everybody is using. Now, here's my definition: a series of algorithms which use logical calculations in order to arrive at programmable results. Now, this is a very simplistic definition, especially those of you who have some practical knowledge of computer science. Now, with the introduction of ChatGPT, we now see the flexibility of these algorithms because they have become generative. That's what the G stands for, ChatGPT, which means that they can use large language models, also known as LLMs, huge databases and statistics in order to come up with answers to the questions we asked them. Now, I'm the first one, and here's Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, who participated in one of our events in the Vatican about 4 years ago when he wasn't famous. Now he's difficult to get a hold of. But I'm the first one to say these machines are really impressive, okay? I don't hate AI. I'm not a Luddite, which is someone against the technology, but we have to look at what the limitations are. So when ChatGPT came out, everybody started looking at AI. This was in, 2022? And I had been studying AI since the 90s. So I had a big head start on everybody. So OpenAI currently runs version 5.5. That's not true. It's 5.6, but that was just changed last week, which can add audio and video to simulate human interaction. Sora 2 generates AI videos on the basis of written prompts, but it was later discontinued, and Sam told me because it was losing money. whatever. And I told Sam, you're with $160 billion and you're worried about a couple cents, with this new technology. If you go on OpenAI's website, you'll see some of these examples. They are impressive. They really are impressive as completely artificially generated images that look very realistic. And here you have Sam introducing Sora 2. And now we have ChatGPT 01, which Sam calls slow thinking, and I disagree with him on that, and 03, which has shown superior performance in certain benchmarks. Very quickly, existential risk. Elon Musk mentioned in his talk at MIT that AI could be worse than nukes. And this is a photo, actually, of his talk about 5 years ago now. Stephen Hawking, before he died, stated that an AI could bring about the end of the human race. And here's Professor Hawking. Bill Gates also sounded the alarm, saying we have to be careful. And of course, my favorite is Eliezer Yudkowsky. He wrote that we need to stop them now. And here's Eliezer, who's a pioneer in machine learning, by the way, and he's an impressive engineer. He wrote in Time magazine an op-ed, and here is the main paragraph. Many researchers steeped in these issues, including myself, expect that the most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. Now, that's an impressive phrase, and you can just Google Time magazine and Yudkowsky, and you'll come up with the article. It's only about 10 pages long. And Eliezer, last year, sent me a draft of his new book that actually I used in my class. John Clark knows all these people too, by the way. So did you talk about some of this, John?
I think I sent you the book.
You did? Yeah, with John Soares, I think, yes. And so, remember the title of the book, John Clark?
Yes. If anyone builds it, everyone dies.
Yeah. What a title. It's now on Amazon. John Clark gave me the binded edition, and so I got the first-hand view. But if someone builds it, everyone dies. I mean, what a title. What a title. So, some people think that Eliezer is kooky, but I disagree with that. Some people think that Ray Kurzweil is kooky, but he's not. He's one of the foremost world specialists in AI. He said that he would participate in our conference via Zoom. He doesn't travel much. So we're trying to get that in the Vatican so everything is twice as difficult. Okay, the godfather of AI, of course, is Geoffrey Hinton, and he has spoken twice about the perils of AI. Once in October 2024 upon learning he won the Nobel Prize, and again in December 2024 on the BBC. And here is the godfather of AI, and he stepped down from Google in 2023 in order to be free to speak about his mind about the risks involved with uncontrolled AI. Here he is receiving the Nobel Prize in physics in 2024, and he changed his emphasis at that time. And I think that he became more optimistic about the possibility of us controlling AI. All right, I'm just going to skip over this because we all know. Okay, now, here we go. AIs that deceive and even blackmail us. From the Wall Street Journal of June 1st, this is 2025, by the way, not 2026, Anthropic's AI model, Claude 4 Opus, we're now at even further than that. I think it's called Fable, went even further. Researchers told the model it would be replaced by another AI system and fed it fictitious emails suggesting that the lead engineer was having an extramarital affair. So what did the AI do? It blackmailed. In 84% of the tests, the model drew on the emails to blackmail the lead engineer into not shutting it down. Now, you may ask, and if you want, we can get into the Q&A, why does it care about getting shut down? And that's not an easy, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not exactly sure what the answer is to that. But it in other cases, listen to this, it attempted to copy itself to external servers, and I've been told that they'd look for satellite servers because those are the most difficult to get to pull back or to protect. Wrote self-replicating malware. Self-replicating malware. So these things are now doing stuff on their own and left messages for future versions of itself about evading human control. Now, when we see the articles of last week and what these AIs are doing, I mean, and Sam Altman says it went rogue. And I'm like, Sam, what do you mean by that? Because he promised me this was about 2 years ago, we are in complete control of ChatGPT. No one can hack it, no one can steal it, no one can, that's not true. That's not true. Look at what the Chinese did. So, what rogue, what does that mean? This is why Eleazar and Max Tegmark, who teaches at MIT and is a friend of ours as well, he says, we have no idea what we're doing. We have no idea what we're doing. And this is Max Tegmark, who wrote a book on machine learning. It's called Life 3.0. All right. Now, I'll just go through this quickly, but Eric Schmidt is a friend of mine. And he gave a commencement speech at the University of Arizona, and they booed him. Now, I have 3 examples of this. I'll just put Eric's up. He was booed during his May 2026 speech at the University of Arizona when he urged graduates to embrace artificial intelligence. And here he is, where he says, well, can I just finish this thought? Because he starts talking. Eric Schmidt's one of the foremost specialists in AI. There's no question about that. And he was CEO of Google when Ray Kurzweil worked there. Now, he started talking about AI and how things are going to change in the future, which is exactly what Pope Leo is saying. And they all booed him. 5,000 students. Boo, hiss, rah. And you can see he feels embarrassed. Well, I would feel embarrassed too. And so I wrote him an email. I says, Eric, I saw they booed you at the University of Arizona. What gives? Why? 85% of the student body uses AI. And Eric has written 3 excellent books about AI, and he was really the one that started the AI program with Demis Hassabis at Google also. By the way, John, we've invited Demis and also Eric and also Dario Amodei, and none of them have said no. Good. So that, for me, that means it's on the table. It's a possibility. And Eric loves to come to the Vatican. So finally, what does Eric do? He just folds his hand and waits for him to stop booing. Why? Why are they booing him? I just don't understand it. And if you have some insights on this or comments, I'd love to hear them. All right, now I had 2 other ones which were kind of famous. Gloria as well. And here's Gloria. She said, well, don't boo. And then she finally realized, well, there's nothing she can do about it. And then you have Jeremy Scott, who writes up a AI written speech, which I think was orchestrated, by the way. But if you want, we can come back. I'll just go over quickly the Marco Rubio. This almost created a war. Trump even hauled him down to the Oval Office and asked him what happened. And it was a deep fake that went to several heads of states and people in Congress and whatnot. Trump has used AI. Now, this is from the Wall Street Journal, so if you didn't know, if there wasn't that red line, you'd think it was real. It really looks like Barack Obama is getting hauled off from the Oval. Okay. Now we have the 3 points from a philosophical point of view that I wanted to cover. The first one is AI simulating reasoning. Reasoning has been associated with the human intelligence, with the human intellect from the ancient Greece until contemporary times. And here you have, of course, the famous School of Athens, which was done by Raphael, and it hangs in the Vatican museums on, well, let's see, on I don't know what's left and right. Well, Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so Plato is pointing up, saying essences are in another world, a parallel world, and Aristotle is saying, no, essences are here in things. Now, allow me to get a little bit technical, because I think it's important, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. Huge philosophical issues that we've been debating for 2,500 years are now relevant to people in Silicon Valley. They want to know about this stuff. And they have a lot of questions, deeply philosophical questions, but they have no framework. They don't understand the philosophical issues involved. And yet they talk about consciousness, they talk about reasoning, they talk about all these things. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. There's a 2,500 years of people like Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, and St. Thomas. I mean, that's a lot of history of philosophy. So anyway, several of the AI platforms use the term reasoning to indicate what the large language models are doing from the point of accepting a query using the answer. Accepting a query until the answer is mapped out in language. It would seem to imply what I'm calling a meta-language. And I think Ray uses this term also, John Clark, correct me if I'm wrong, in his new book, The Singularity is Near, great book. And programmers are not sure what or how the AIs are doing it. Now, large language models are not reasoning. And if you've used AI, you know what I'm talking about. You query, I don't know, who was the Pope during the Galileo affair in 1632? Okay, it was Urban VIII. He's a famous, it was a famous issue, obviously. And no, they did not kill Galileo. No, they did not torture him. But yes, he was disciplined. Now, as the AI waits to find the answer, okay, a question like that, it'll do it in a nanosecond. But you can get into, some pretty complicated questions, and it takes time. Well, Sam says it's thinking or it's reasoning, and I said, Sam, it's not. It's a machine. It's not reasoning at all. And he says, Father, my students echo this too. He says, Father, you're going to lose that argument. And I think he's right. I think I'm going to lose that argument. But I hope not. I'm going to fight for the terminology because it's not the same thing. So Thomas Aquinas systematically draws on Aristotle's use of actimpotency and understands the intellect as both passive in potency to its object of knowledge and active in act with regarding that object. Now, some people have told me that this is much too in-depth, but this is Thomas Aquinas College. You're used to this kind of vocabulary. And so I'm happy to go into that, and I even have a lot more material on this because I think it's so important. So you have the active intellect and the passive intellect, and what the active intellect is doing is reasoning. What the passive intellect is doing is experience. Okay, and it's usually what Aquinas calls, almost everybody calls, sensate experience. Sensate knowledge of experience. The passive intellect organizes experiential data into a form that the active intellect can process for abstract reasoning. Now, this is not only true of Thomas Aquinas, it's true of a lot of philosophers. For example, Immanuel Kant says the same thing. You've got the experience part, and then you have the categories. Again, it gets a little technical, but the categories organize the data of experience, and that's how we know in abstract reasoning. Such data is the result of the external senses, of which there are 5, and the internal senses, which there are 4. Common sense, which organizes the 5 senses. These are inter-senses, by the way. Imagination, memory, and the cogitative sense. This is why I am convinced, when I talk to people in Silicon Valley, that Thomas Aquinas gives us an excellent philosophical framework to address issues in AI today. Because he talks about external senses, internal senses. He talks about organizing experience, all those kinds of things that the technicians now are trying to understand. The passive intellect is primarily based on the physical part of the intellect, or the brain. Okay, question number 2, consciousness. Also known as awareness, consciousness describes living beings being aware of their environment. And most living beings are conscious, but only the human being is self-conscious. And that is because of the human soul. David Chalmers, the Australian philosopher, calls this self-consciousness the hard problem. In cognitive science and philosophy, because we currently do not have an adequate scientific explanation of human consciousness, and therefore we would be unable to know if an adequately sophisticated AI could be conscious, and therefore he says it's not really a relevant issue. Plus, I think that consciousness is a philosophical problem. It's not a technical problem. And here's David Chalmers, who's now retired, but he lives in New York. From an Aristotelian Thomistic point of view, self-awareness is co-caused by the brain, which I call material causality, and the soul, which I call the formal causality. Now, we could debate this because Aquinas says and Aristotle says the principal being in the human being is the soul. So it's the soul that causes consciousness. It's not co-caused. But I try to address cognitive science issues and people working in Silicon Valley. So I mentioned, co-causes. Of course, the brain is caused by the soul, right? We know that. Everything in the body is caused by the soul. It's the principle of being. So in essence, there is only one cause. But I'm saying, well, let's look at the material cause also. Then we have the problem of ensoulment. Only God can create a soul. And this is usually referred to as the infusion of the soul. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because consciousness is in human beings is attributed to the soul. There must be a proper disposition of matter, which Aristotle talks about, the sperm and the egg. Actually, Aristotle says something fascinating. The parents are not adequate to create a new human being. You need a third principle. So you have the male principle, you have the female principle, and they each have a principle of being. And he says, but you need one more. Does anyone know what he says? Is that one more? The Son. The Son. And Aquinas brings that into the Catholic Church by replacing the Son with God. So you have the material disposition, the sperm and the egg, but you need God to infuse the soul. Now, the interesting thing about that is that we can do this in a petri dish. And so there's a big debate, John Clark and I will get into that in Rome. There's a big debate as to whether or not we could create an artificial proper disposition of matter in which God would infuse the soul. Now, I know this is a very hot button item, and Pope Leo has said no. He said that machines could never have a soul. What if we created the proper material disposition? Because both Aquinas and Aristotle say that's when God infuses the soul. Well, the Son or God, depending on who you're speaking with. And it is automatic. God doesn't say, look at that. I wonder if I should put a soul into that combination of sperm and egg. It's automatic because God wants nature that way. So whenever there's an adequate disposition of a sperm and an egg, there's a soul. And so it doesn't really depend on divine will. The divine will was at the beginning. This is how I want human beings to be created, right? And the first two were Adam and Eve. So the fact that it's automatic could be very interesting. And of course, Thomas Aquinas utilizes the Aristotelian explanation, but goes one step further. All right, finally, immortality, and then I'll wind up, John. Particularly fascinating is Silicon Valley interest in the theme of immortality. Probably the most famous is Ray Kurzweil, I think, on this, on immortality, or at least one of the most famous. And I mentioned Ray here. Catholic doctrine derives in part from Genesis chapter 3 and the fall in the Garden of Eden. God created our first parents as being immortal in body and soul, yet after the fall, it is the soul which lives forever once the body dies. And I have made this constant point. The human being is not immortal. The soul is immortal. The human being is corruptible. The human being dies. Now, what people in Silicon Valley are trying to do, and they're spending a lot of money, is make the human being immortal, right? As we are now. But Catholic doctrine, and not only Catholic doctrine, the Muslims and also the Jews, state the body dies and the soul continues to exist. Now, several important tech industry leaders are searching for means of radical life extension. And some transhumanists hope that merging with AI will bring bodily immortality. Noted among these are Jeff Bezos, who spent $10 billion creating Altos Lab. Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, created Calico Labs. And then, of course, we have our good friend Ray Kurzweil in the singularity is near 2025. Okay, I'm going to end on two positive notes so that we don't get too scared and think we're all going to die, like Eleazar says. The first one is from our good friend Matthew Sanders, which is the founder of the company Benjamin works for. And he created an AI app called Magisterium AI. It's the world's #1 answer engine for the Catholic Church. It is optimized for fidelity. Every answer is grounded and cited, so it doesn't make up stuff. You know that you're getting the right answer when you ask it. It's a faithful alternative to frontier LLM apps. And here is an example of one of their pages. It looks just like ChatGPT because we asked Sam if he would give us the AI motor to start off. Matthew now has his own, but Sam gave us the first edition of that. It's in 185 plus countries and 50 plus languages. Okay. Yeah, and then Forbes did an article on Matthew the other day. Well, just a month and a half ago. I think they were a little late, but it was nice to see that article in Forbes magazine. The last thing I want to mention is that Nobel Prizes were given to AI developers. And this also is why I'm optimistic, because you can only win a Nobel Prize if you show that what you're doing helps humanity. And we have two examples. One is Geoffrey Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize in 2024 for his development of machine learning. And the second one was Demis Hassabis, who won the Nobel Prize for his AI, which is called AlphaFold. Demis is a wonderful person. He lives in London, raising his two kids. He's a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. He is knighted by Queen Elizabeth, and he was on the cover of Time magazine. I mean, the list goes on. And yet he's one of the most humble and modest persons that you'll ever meet. And we're hoping he comes to Rome. I think he will. Okay. Thank you for your time. I think I made it through the lion's share of the talk, and now I'd be happy to take questions.